road stretched ahead in a straight and endless line, the asphalt rippling in the heat. Daniel tapped the steering wheel with restless fingers, his sunglasses reflecting nothing but pale sky and sand. Beside him, Claire shifted in her seat, fanning herself with a folded brochure. When the sign appeared, it seemed almost accidental. A tilted plank of wood nailed to a leaning post, its letters so faded they were hardly readable. Scenic route, Claire deciphered aloud, her voice carrying a note of relief. Worth a try, Daniel said. He slowed the car, turned onto the narrow road, dust billowing up behind them. The new road wound gently, promising a break from the monotony. For the first few miles, it felt like a secret, something quaint, hidden, meant only for them. After an hour, the road still rolled through the same vast desert, yellow and gold beneath the pitiless sun. They passed no gas stations, no towns, not even a billboard. Claire leaned forward in her seat, peering out. Funny there aren't any mile markers, she said. Daniel smiled tightly. It's a shortcut, probably not a major road. The asphalt seemed thinner now, cracks snaking across its surface. The landscape was unchanging, flat in every direction. Even the sky looked empty, washed out by heat, as though the world had been stripped down to its bare bones. They rolled down the windows, but no breeze came. The air outside was heavy, oppressive, like breathing against glass. Claire tried the radio. Only static. She shut it off and folded her arms. It feels too quiet out here. Daniel said nothing. He had begun to notice it too. The silence wasn't peaceful, but deliberate, as if the desert itself were listening. When he glanced in the rearview mirror, the long road behind them shimmered in the heat, already dissolving into sand. By mid-afternoon, the road narrowed. Asphalt gave way to dirt, and dirt soon to sand, pressed flat as if by invisible hands. The tires hummed uneasily. We should turn back, Claire said, her voice sharper now. Daniel slowed, scanning the horizon. The faint road they'd come on was gone, replaced by undisturbed sand stretching endlessly. He rubbed his eyes, certain he was mistaken, but the truth was clear. The road no longer existed. Where's the sign? Claire asked. She twisted in her seat, searching the horizon. It should be behind us. Daniel, where's the sign? There was nothing but desert. They drove on because there was nothing else to do. The sun sank slowly, dragging the shadows longer across the sand. The car's engine strained, the gas gauge tilting lower. Claire whispered, "We'll run out before we find anything." Daniel tried to be practical. Maybe it connects back to the highway further on. It has to. But even as he said it, he felt the lie settle heavy between them. The road had disappeared so neatly, so thoroughly, that it seemed less like a mistake and more like a trick. Near sunset, they spotted shapes ahead, dark silhouettes against the orange glow. Relief surged through Claire. She sat up straighter. People! As they drew closer, the figures resolved into something else entirely. Not people, but wooden posts, each tilted and weathered, set in a crooked line that led deeper into the desert. No wires, no signs, no reason for them to exist. Daniel slowed the car to a crawl. The posts seemed to lean toward the road, as though listening. Claire turned her face away from them. "Don't stop," she said. Night fell quickly. They pulled over when the gas needle dipped to near empty. The headlights cast pale cones into the sand, revealing nothing but dust swirling in the air. They sat in silence for a long time, the desert pressing against the car windows. Claire finally spoke. "Do you hear it?" Daniel listened. At first, there was only the steady tick of the cooling engine. Then something else, a faint hum, low and constant, as though the desert itself were breathing. Claire gripped his arm. It's been getting closer. At dawn, Daniel stepped outside the car. The sand was cool under his shoes, pale in the first light. He turned in a circle, searching for tire tracks, some trace of their arrival. There was nothing. No road, no marks, not even footprints from where he had stepped the day before. The desert stretched perfectly smooth in every direction. When he returned to the car, Claire was staring through the windshield, her face pale. "Daniel," she said softly. "Look." He followed her gaze. In the distance, a wooden sign stood crooked in the sand. "Scenic route," but no road led to it. They sat in the car until the sun climbed higher, the heat pressing down. The gas tank was nearly dry. "We have to walk," Daniel said finally. Claire shook her head. "Where? Everything looks the same." But he opened the door anyway, the dry air rushing in. He told himself that if they could just reach the sign, maybe the road would appear again. Maybe this would all make sense. Claire followed him reluctantly, shielding her face from the glare. Together they walked into the desert, toward the faded letters. That seemed no closer, no matter how far they went. By midday, the sign stood just ahead, its letters warped, wood splintering in the heat. They reached it at last, but when Daniel laid his hand against it, the wood crumbled into sand beneath his fingers. Claire let out a soft cry. Around them, the desert shimmered, the horizon bending, folding. The hum grew louder, a steady vibration that filled their ears, their chests, their bones. Daniel turned to Claire, but her face blurred in the heat, her features dissolving, as if she were only another mirage. The desert opened before him, vast and endless. The road was gone. The cabin was small, square, unremarkable, crouched at the edge of the water like a stubborn old dog. The family, Robert, his wife Ellen, and their 2 children, stepped out of the car with the weary cheerfulness of people trying to salvage a vacation. The air was thick with the smell of pine and dust, though something about the silence felt wrong. Robert noticed it first. The lake stretched out before them, wide and dark, but strangely calm. It was a summer afternoon, yet there were no dragonflies darting over the water, no birds skimming its surface, no steady droning of mosquitoes, not even the sound of waves lapping the shore. It was as if the entire place were holding its breath. Ellen tried to laugh it off. "Well," she said, fiddling with her sunglasses, "at least we won't get bitten to death out here." The children raced off to claim their bedrooms, leaving Robert standing alone on the porch, staring at the lake's unbroken surface. That night, after Ellen and the children had gone to bed, Robert sat on the porch with a beer. The moon cast a pale, watery glow across the lake, making it look less like water and more like polished stone. Then he heard it, a faint splash. He froze, tilting his head. Another splash, distant, like someone tossing the pebble into the shallows. He leaned forward, squinting. The lake remained perfectly still, a sheet of unbroken glass. When he returned inside, Ellen was brushing her teeth. "Hear something?" she asked, noticing his expression. "Just the water," he said, though he didn't quite believe it. The next few days passed with uneasy normalcy. They cooked, played board games, walked the trails. The children grew restless, disappointed that the lake offered nothing. No minnows darting near the shore, no frogs croaking at dusk. Ellen admitted she felt unsettled too. "I don't like how quiet it is," she said one afternoon, closing a book she had tried and failed to focus on. "Even in the woods you usually hear birds." Robert wanted to agree, but he didn't. He didn't want the children to notice how tense he'd become, glancing out at the water every few minutes. That night the splashing returned, louder, closer. He stood by the window and watched the moonlit lake, waiting for ripples, for movement, for anything. But the water never stirred. On the 4th night, Robert awoke to the sound again. Not faint this time, not distant. It was inside the cabin. He sat up, heart racing. The splashes were muffled, as if the walls themselves held water. He placed his palm against the wooden paneling beside the bed. Cold, damp. "Rob?" Ellen's voice was groggy. "What are you doing?" "Do you hear it?" he whispered. She listened, frowning. "I don't hear anything. Come back to bed." But he could hear it. Sharp splashes, followed by a kind of sucking gurgle, as though something large were shifting in deep water. He pressed his ear to the wall and felt the dampness seeping into his skin. The next morning, Robert checked the walls in daylight. They were dry, unremarkable pine boards. No stains, no damp patches. Ellen gave him a worried look over breakfast. "You're pale," she said. "Maybe you should get some rest." The children bickered at the table, but Robert barely heard them. He was watching the lake again, its still surface reflecting the sky like a mirror. His own reflection stared back at him, small and insignificant, framed by the black water. By evening, he had begun to notice hairline cracks in the wood by the bedroom window, thin lines spidering outward, as if something inside were pressing against the boards. The children grew quieter as the days passed. They no longer ran through the cabin shouting. Instead, they sat by the windows, staring out at the lake for long stretches of time. At dinner, Robert asked them what they were looking at. "The fish," his daughter said softly. "There are no fish," Robert said a little too sharply. "Yes, there are," she insisted. "You just don't see them." Her brother nodded, his face pale in the fading light. That night, Robert lay awake listening. The splashing came again, steady and rhythmic, filling the cabin as though the walls were hollow. He imagined the room sinking into the lake, water pressing in, boards swelling and bending. Ellen woke him near dawn, shaking his shoulder. "Robert," she whispered. "I heard it. I finally heard it." Her eyes were wide, frightened. It was right here in the walls, like something swimming. Relief washed over him that she had heard it too, though it lasted only a moment, because now he could hear it again, louder than ever, splashes thrashing, like bodies churning in deep water. The children stirred in the next room, whispering to each other. "It wants in," Ellen said, clutching his arm. "Rob, it wants in." The cracks in the wood had widened by evening. Robert traced them with his fingertips and felt a faint vibration, like the heartbeat of something vast and unseen. The lake remained still, too still. No wind disturbed its surface. No insect broke its silence. It lay dark and waiting, like a mirror that refused to give anything back. That night, the sound filled the cabin completely. Not splashes anymore, but rushing, crashing water, as though a tide were rising inside the walls. The children pressed their faces to the windows, whispering to the unseen fish. Ellen clung to Robert's arm, her nails digging into his skin. "Don't you see?" she whispered. "It's not out there, it's here." And as the walls shuddered and groaned, Robert thought he saw the lake ripple at last, only not outside the window, but inside the glass, where his reflection no longer moved as he did. The ferry left them on the dock, with a groaning of ropes and a sharp smell of salt. Sarah and Michael stood with their suitcases in hand, blinking at the small coastal village that clung to the rocky shore. The houses looked weather-worn, their shutters crooked, their paint worn away by wind. Their cottage was at the edge of the island, perched on a bluff facing the sea. From its windows they could see the lighthouse, a black shape at the far end of the cliffs. It rose like a finger pointing to the sky, its glass top broken, its railings rusted through. The innkeeper who gave them the keys told them almost casually, "That old thing hasn't worked in decades." Sarah smiled politely, but she felt a quiet thrill at the thought of it. A broken lighthouse, forgotten and left to lean against the wind. The cottage was drafty, its floors creaking with every step. Still, it felt cozy enough once the lamps were lit. They cooked a small dinner and watched the sea from the window until night fell. It was past midnight when Sarah woke. The room was washed in pale light, thin as milk. At first she thought it was the moon. Then the light shifted, sweeping slowly across the wall. She sat up in bed. The beam paused at the window, lingering there as if searching. Her breath caught in her throat. Beside her, Michael stirred. "What is it?" "The light," she whispered. "From the lighthouse." Michael pushed up on his elbow, frowning. He glanced at the window, at the pale beam pressing against it. Then he laughed softly. "It can't be. The place hasn't worked in years." But the light was there all the same. In daylight, the lighthouse looked harmless again, just a ruin of iron and stone. Its windows were shattered, its glass top bent inward like a cracked skull. Over breakfast, Sarah brought it up carefully. "I saw it last night, I know I did." The beam moved across the window. Michael shook his head. "Maybe a boat offshore, some kind of spotlight." Sarah didn't argue. She only stared at the dark shape on the hill, its shadow stretching long across the water. The second night, the light returned. Sarah woke first, as before, the pale beam crawling across the wall. It moved slower this time, pausing at the window. Steady and patient, she shook Michael awake. He muttered, annoyed, but when he saw it for himself, he fell silent. Together they watched as the beam slid away, fading into the night. Michael's voice was low. "There's no way that thing works." Neither of them slept again. The next morning, Michael asked around at the village dock. He was met with laughter, shrugs, and old men shaking their heads. "Glass is broken," one fisherman said. "No lamp in there at all." "Hasn't shone since my father's time," another added. Sarah stood apart, listening. The men weren't mocking exactly, but there was a closed-off air about them, as though they had heard the story before and wanted no part of it. When they left, she felt the fishermen's eyes on their backs, watching them climb the hill to the cottage. That evening, they decided to see it for themselves. The climb was steep, the path overgrown with grass that whispered against their legs. The lighthouse loomed above, black against the fading sky. Inside, the air was damp, smelling of stone and rust. The stairs spiraled upward, broken in places, the railing crumbling at their touch. Sarah clutched the wall as they climbed, her heart thudding. At the top, the lantern room was shattered. Broken glass crunched under their feet. The machinery lay rusted and silent. There was nothing that could cast a beam of light. And yet, standing there, Sarah felt watched from the sea, or from the glassless windows, or perhaps from somewhere behind her. Michael's voice was tight. "There's nothing here, you see that, don't you?" She nodded, but the nod felt false in her throat. On the third night, the light came back stronger. It cut across the bedroom, clear and white, and stopped at the window, as though it had found what it was looking for. Sarah sat up, heart pounding. She could feel it pressing through the glass, a weight of brightness. Michael tried to stay calm. "We'll leave tomorrow, take the morning ferry." But Sarah couldn't look away from the beam. The longer it lingered, the more it seemed less like light and more like an eye. They packed in silence the next morning. The air was heavy, the sea restless. As they walked to the dock, Sarah glanced back. The lighthouse stood dark against the sky, no different than before, and yet she thought she could see a faint gleam in its broken crown, like sunlight caught in a mirror. On the ferry, Michael held her hand tightly. "We'll laugh about this someday," he said. Sarah didn't answer. She was watching the shore shrink behind them, the black tower growing smaller, until at last it was nothing but a dot. And then, just before it vanished, a pale light swept across the sea, pausing for the briefest moment on the deck of the ferry.